It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Here's what the next thing we said. Okay, so if this is what the typical Tesla buyer now looks like, they're obviously high income, they're people who value technology,
more established in their life,
more established. What does this mean for the auto industry in general?
Sure.
And we want to kind of create a peer group of what vehicle should you compare a Tesla to.
Yep.
So the first one up was BMW.
Love it.
Because what is BMW? Is the ultimate driving machine.
That's
that
right.
is what was marketed for years. This is what drivers drive. Well, then Tesla comes about, and here's what's interesting about Tesla. The battery sits underneath where you drive it, so it's very evenly weighted. It's got a low center of gravity. These things drive like sports cars. Yep. They're also, as Elon Musk says, he doesn't make a slow Tesla. There is not a such thing as a slow Tesla. So we said, well, let's compare, because if you have the ultimate driving machine, that's BMW.
Yep.
How does that compare? And we even did kind of a more, performance-based BMW Model 3.
So
go ahead.
So let's look at the performance specs if you kind of just compare the two. And we went with the 3 Series, the M340i all-wheel drive versus the Tesla Model 3 all-wheel drive. We did the long-range version, right? Yep. So if we're going to compare sort of luxury to luxury, we want to look at the luxury version of the Model 3.
Sure.
We'll look at a different one in a second. What we found is that from a horsepower perspective, the BMW comes in at 382 horsepower. Tesla Model 3 long range comes in at 346. So BMW does have it edged out just a touch.
Yep.
If we look at the one thing you hear from Tesla all the time is how quickly it can accelerate. Well, if you look at 0 to 60 miles per hour, the BMW is at 4.1 seconds. Tesla actually edges it out just a hair at 4.0 seconds. Now, that caught me by surprise because
I knew it.
When I hear these Tesla fanatics, I'm going to throw you in that category. The one thing I always hear is, man, how fast it accelerates. Man, how fast it takes off. When I see this, it looks kind of the same to me as the 3 Series.
Look, this is a financial show. So we wanted to think about the finances. We're balancing the performance with the finances. If you want the fastest version, you can spend a few $1,000s more and get the performance version of the Tesla Model 3. It will drop another second off of this. We can get into the low 3s.
Okay, so that does make a difference.
But I wanted to be fair to trying to do an apples to apples where you're balancing both the financial decisions as well as the performance decisions.
And then the last spec we want to look at was top speed. The BMW comes in at a top speed. Why do you chuckle? At 155 miles an hour, it does edge out the Tesla Model 3 at 145
Well,
miles
because
per
when
hour.
I see this stat, I did an informal survey around the office today, and I said, what's the fastest you've ever driven? And the fastest I think I've ever been, I'm embarrassed to say I was probably in my, teenage years,
yeah.
And I was really ragging out the poor Ragalier and giving it all she had. And I think I got up to 110 miles per hour.
In the Cavalier, you got it to 110.
I mean, that thing was shaking. I mean, it's not made for that speed. I think its comfortable speed was around 50 miles per hour. So at 110, I think that rivets were coming out and screws. It was just not a good experience. When I asked you, you said your mother growing up was pulled over doing 107 miles per hour on the way to baseball practice.
We were on the way from Panama City Beach and I had baseball practice that day, so we had to get there on time. So this was like a 7-hour trip. Apparently 100 miles an hour is going to do it.
And then Rebe, our producer, when I asked her, I think I might have been 90 miles per hour. And I was like, Rebe, I think I did that on the way to the beach like a few weeks ago. So it was just kind of funny seeing all the different personalities.
Yeah.
Whenever I see stats, and when Full-Time Equivalent put this in, and I'm glad he put it in, but nobody's driving 145 miles per hour. If you are, I hope I'm not on the road while you're there.
So, okay, if I'm looking at this, just performance specs alone, I'm going to say, if we're just comparing apples to apples here, it looks like the BMW does edge it out just a hair, but perhaps it doesn't make that big of a difference. Perhaps there isn't that big of a difference between 380 horsepower versus 340, or a top speed of 145 versus 155.
Well, realize when you're doing that, the horsepowers, that's always it's a hard thing to calculate when you're comparing an electric vehicle compared to a traditional combustible engine, because Tesla's, some of the biggest fun ratio you're going to get is that right off the line instant torque.
Sure.
It's hard to compete with that. So I disagree with you a little. I think that the Tesla edges it out. But here's what's going to push the needle completely over a little bit. Let's go into the numbers.
So let's talk a little bit about the finance. Is a Tesla, the Model 3 that we're talking about, the all-wheel drive long range, is it less expensive than a BMW if we look at the cost of ownership over the first 5 years? That's kind of what we want to compare. First 60 months of ownership. Well, this is what we found. The initial cost for a BMW 3 Series is just a touch under $54,000. For the Tesla Model 3, it's just under $47,000. And I love that full-time equivalent, Daniel, put this in there, paid in cash. Because if we're talking about luxury automobiles, we don't finance those. We pay them off inside of the first year. So $54,000 versus $47,000.
Right.
So then we got to think about maintenance and repairs. If we look at maintenance costs for the BMW 3 Series, it comes in at about $9,400 over the first 5 years. Maintenance and service for the Tesla Model 3, about $2,700.
Well, we had to, let's be honest here. Now, look, I've owned, like my wife has an Audi.
Sure.
All these European cars, that's your biggest sticker shock, is after you buy it, you then start going through the service applications, you know, or the service, when we get to 10,000 miles, 20,000, you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing driving this car? Because even an oil change is a lot more expensive than it should be. And then you find out some maintenance is a lot more. Tesla, but to make this even fair, we did some craziness because listen to some of the stuff I had Daniel put in here. We assumed 2 new sets of tires.
Okay.
We assumed that 7 tire rotation and alignments.
Okay.
We did 2 new cabin air filters.
Got to do that.
And then we did 5 sets of windshield wipers.
Oh, so we like really thought about
because
everything.
we had to try really hard to get it up to 2763. Because I've owned a Tesla now for 2 years, and here's what I find interesting. You forget to rotate the tires because you usually rotate the tires when you change the oil. Well, you don't have any oil to change. You don't use brake pads in a Tesla because it has the regenerative braking. So when you take your foot off the gas, it brings the car to a stop. So you're not even really using the brake at all. So there's no brake pads to replace, but every 300,000 or 400,000 miles. I'll be surprised if I can change mine at 300,000 or 400,000 miles. So it really is. That's why we had to really search long and hard, and that's why tire rotations, changing tires, windshield wipers. It's stuff like that, but you can see it's night and day on what the maintenance of these 2 cars are.
So let's talk about the big one that most people talk about when they think about going electric. Let's look at the costs in gas versus electricity. So obviously BMW has to have a higher caliber gasoline that you put in there. So the first 5-year cost on the internal combustible engine is $8,000 for the BMW, compared with the electricity cost of just under $2,800 for the Model 3.
So here's what went into those numbers, because I know people are going to be curious. We didn't put everything in here because we want to keep this simple to understand from a visual standpoint. But we assumed 15,000 miles per year for both vehicles. We for the BMW, because it gets 26 miles a gallon, we figured that's 577 gallons of gas. Because they use premium fuel. Unfortunately, fuel is cheap right now. So premium fuel was $2.78 a gallon because they require premium. And then so that comes out to be about $1,605 per year or $8,025 for 5 years.
For the first 5, yep.
For a Tesla, it's a little different because Tesla's, it works out to it's about 0.037, so 4 cents a mile.
Okay.
That's what a Tesla works out to. At 15,000 miles per year, that's $555 a year, or works out to $2,775 over 5 years.
So if we add up all these, for the initial cost of ownership, well, when you look at the BMW 3 Series, it's just over $71,000. Tesla Model 3 is only at $52,500. So if we just stop there, it appears as though in the first 5 years, the Tesla is the better deal, is less expensive than the BMW.
I mean, I got to go ahead and tell you, you had a loaner car. Your wife has a Mercedes, and the loaner car you were driving was a sedan while they were doing some work on it. And you did call me. You said, Brian, who would buy this over a Tesla?
It did not. I've ridden your car so much, I could not get my head wrapped around the initial price tag of what that Mercedes coupe would cost relative to what you get in a Model 3 for. It didn't equate to me. And now when you look at this, it equates even less to me.
But wait, there's more, because we know. Now, look, if you're the type of person that's buying these type of vehicles, you don't want to get stuck with the long-term maintenance of a European car. Because that's where they eat you alive. When people tell me, hey, you can get a used Mercedes or a used BMW, I'm like, yeah, you know why? It's because people realize how much it costs to maintain these vehicles, so they get rid of them, and the poor person that buys these vehicles used is stuck holding the bag on what these things cost. So let's look at the resale value, because that is the other part of the equation. We assumed, now look, I don't want anybody driving a car for just 5 years.
Sure.
Because I think a car is only getting warmed up after 5 years of ownership. Maybe even Tesla is not even getting warmed up at that point. It might still be breaking the basic plastic wrap on it, because we're going to talk more about that in a minute of what you can expect out of your Tesla over the long term. But consider what resale value does on these two vehicles.
So again, we went and pulled the data. If you look at the BMW 3 Series, it has a resale value after 5 years based on that initial starting price of about $25,000. So if you think about the initial cost of ownership minus what you could get for resale, the total cost of ownership over a 5-year life of the automobile is about $46,000.
That's a lot of depreciation, by the way.
It's a lot of depreciation. So then we look at the Tesla Model 3, and we know that 5-year-old Teslas now retain about 55% of their initial value. So again, your resale value is roughly the same, a little bit higher, about $26,000.
Your starting point was a lot lower,
Starting point was a lot lower. So our total cost of ownership for the Tesla over the full 5-year cycle, a little bit less than $27,000.
So this almost seems like an unfair analysis because, you are asking yourself, why would anybody buy one of these European entry-level luxury vehicles when you could buy the Tesla if there's this much of a financial difference? And by the way, just so y'all don't think, man, these guys, this was such in the bag. I can't believe that they were so in the side of Tesla on this. I want to show you what is actually going on out there in the market right now. This is some research we found, and now this is from January 2019 to June of 2019. I want you to notice Tesla Model 3 is smoking all the other entry-level luxury brands. And here's something else that I think is quite interesting and bodes well for Tesla. Every vehicle on this list, sans the Mercedes C-Class and the Tesla Model 3, are entry-level SUVs.
SUVs, yeah.
All of these, the Lexus RX, the Acura RDX, the BMW X3, X5, the Lexus NX, the Cadillac XTS, these are all SUVs. Yep. So what's coming out this year is, and you're starting to see these on the street now, especially around here, is you're seeing the Tesla Model Y, which is the more affordable SUV version of the Model 3.
So I think what you're probably predicting is that once the Model Y data does come in, relative to these other smaller or mid-size SUVs, it's probably going to be even more stark.
Well, they're predicting that the Model Y will actually be more successful than the Model 3 because more people, as this data shows, want an SUV. You've even said it yourself. You like having a hatch in the back that can put things in the back more than you want to have a trunk or a hatchback.
That's exactly right.
So, this is pretty telling, and I think that this does show that our research is not off. There are starting to be big seismic shifts to what's going on in the automotive industry. So this leads me to think about, okay, so this is what's going on in near luxury. And we talk about all the time, I don't want you financing any car outside of basic cars like the Honda Accords, the Toyota Camrys, and those things, because I know you need dependable transportation to get to work. Anytime you go into luxury, that's your BMW, that's your Mercedes. In the past, I've said that is Tesla. Maybe I still am. I've considered you better pay essentially cash for those vehicles because otherwise you're faking your life. Because if you're spending that premium so you can flex and look all super successful and driving a fancy car, you better do it because you can afford it, not because you just want to look good and you're leveraging your future financial self on that.